Good morning, everyone, and welcome to News Extra. And my guest this morning is Gering City Planner Annie Folck. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
And here to talk about the comprehensive plan update process. And we have another open house that's coming up very shortly on this.
We do. Tuesday, the 29th from 4 to 7, we're going to have another open house. We had the consultants come in October, got a lot of good feedback from the community, and so now we want to bring it back before the public with some of the ideas they've come up with and just get them to weigh in on which ones work for Gering and which don't.
What kind of feedback did you receive during that first open house?
You know, Gering values its parks a lot. That was something that was loud and clear, that needs to continue to be a priority for the community. A lot of interest in additional commercial development for the city. A lot of people would love to see more restaurants, more retail. You know, that's always challenging of how we're going to get there, trying to compete with online sales and everything else. But there was a lot of interest in that. Transportation, a few people having some comments about wanting pathways, wanting bike lanes, that sort of thing as well.
Okay. And in the past, of course, Gering has had, I guess, a situation where a lot of people considered it as a suburb of Scottsbluff, which it's not, of course. But it certainly has, as far as a proportion rate, it certainly has more residential compared to, you know, the mix of commercial and industrial in Scottsbluff. How do you go about putting together a mix that tends to please everybody?
And you're never going to find anything that pleases everybody.
Yeah,
but I think some of our goals are especially looking at like the Scottsbluff-Gering corridor. What's the best thing to do with that space? You know, should it continue to be industrial? Should we look at a little more commercial development in that area? Our downtown, what do we do there? Are there things that we can do programs that we can start, anything we can do to encourage additional development? One thing I thought was really interesting was in Scottsbluff, when we did this process, they said that they already have about every Mexican restaurant they can think of. There's a lot of Mexican restaurants in Scottsbluff. I don't think that's a surprise to everyone. In Gering, we had tons of comments saying we would love a Mexican restaurant in Gering.
Yeah.
So it's very, very interesting seeing the difference between the two communities. And so, you know, some of it is just making people aware of that.
Sure.
But then additionally trying to make sure that we have the areas properly zoned, that we have the proper programs in place so that if someone did come forward and wanted to do that, that we could make that process as smooth as possible. Okay.
Well, we're going to come back in just a moment on News Extra, talk a little bit more about the open house that's coming up, the process moving forward, as well as some of the history of comprehensive planning in Gering, I should say. We'll be right back after this. And we're back on News Extra with Annie Folck, the city planner from the city of Gering. And thank you very much for joining us today. I forgot to say that earlier. The process of putting together a comprehensive plan certainly is not easy. It's been a while since Gering's had one, correct?
It is. The plan that we're currently operating under is from 1995. Typically, these plans look out 10 to 20 years, so it's definitely time for an update.
And you know, how do these things tend to evolve? Because when it comes to businesses wanting to come in, you hear about variances and special permits and the whole nine yards, because people want to locate certain things where they want to locate them, which may or may not fit with the existing zoning.
Right.
How do you reconcile those and put those all together?
So typically in the state of Nebraska, all zone changes should be in conformance with the comprehensive plan. So now it doesn't mean that you have a map and you can't vary from that ever, but the comp plan should lay out the guidelines, should explain in general how you want your neighborhoods to look. And so if you have a good up-to-date comprehensive plan, that should avoid a lot of the issues that people have with rezones, because it should be very predictable. If someone wants to ask for a rezone and they give me a call, I can say either, yeah, the comp plan says that should probably be commercial someday. I will give you a recommendation in favor of the rezone. I can't guarantee what the planning commission will say or do, but most likely it should go through planning and commission and council without too much trouble. Or they can call and I can say, well, the comp plan says specifically that should always be residential. It's right in the middle of a residential neighborhood. You can certainly apply, but I'm just going to tell you up front that it's going to be an uphill battle. And hopefully, if we have a good plan, we can head off some of that before it ever becomes a big controversy, because there will be a lot more predictability in the process, which I have found that if you can tell people up front at the beginning of the process what their issues are going to be, it really, really helps. It tends to be the worst situation to get in is when someone has invested a lot of time, money, effort into a project only to be told no at the very end. If we can at least give them some predictability at the front end, I think it'll make our community a lot more business friendly.
And I know one of the things that has occasionally driven resident complaints tends to be the approaches into a city, some of them being more heavily industrial as opposed to, commercial, and residential being a little more friendly and welcoming to people coming in. But you do have to locate those industrial and heavy commercial type of developments somewhere. And that, of course, is what a comprehensive plan is supposed to at least provide the guidelines of this is where we want those to go in the future.
And it's interesting you say that, because I think a perfect example of that is actually 10th Street from the railroad tracks to the river. That area has traditionally been very industrial, and when we got our survey results and our information from our open house, it was very split. There were a lot of people who said that's industrial, it should be industrial. There were other people who said that they don't like the appearance of it. They want that when people come across from Scottsbluff into Gering, they want it to look a lot nicer. I think right now they're going to be presenting some different ideas for that corridor, so if you want to know a little more about it, come to the open house. But basically, what we're hoping to do is kind of strike a balance there so that it's not the ugliest area in town, but also understanding the value of those industrial businesses and making sure that we accommodate those as well, because jobs are important too.
Yeah, and they definitely are. And of course, the quality of life, you try to balance everything for all the residents of a community in this way as the community grows and develops over time. Any chance you're going to give us a little bit of a sneak preview as to some of the ideas that might be presented during this open house?
They're going to be talking about parks. They're going to be talking about pathways, bike lanes, all of those things that some of them we are getting very, very polarized responses to. So trying to determine which of those best fits Gering. And so we're going to be looking at different nodes of the city, different intersections. Should we have all our commercial businesses concentrated in one main business district, or should we maybe have a few more areas closer to neighborhoods or along some of our major intersections? And so we're just trying to determine what the best long-term layout is for all of the different land uses.
Okay, and the process going forward after this coming open house, what's the timeline for the entire process?
For the comp plan, we should be wrapping it up pretty quickly after this process. We're getting towards the home stretch now.
Okay.
So hopefully the comp plan will be done sometime in the spring, March or April timeframe. But then once we have the comp plan completed, we're going to be diving right into the zoning code and updating that as well, because our zoning code hasn't been updated since 1984.
And of course that comes right after, right with a comprehensive plan or zoning. They go hand in hand.
Yep. Once our comp plan tells us what we want our neighborhoods to look like, then we turn right around and make sure our zoning code reflects that, so that we're not trying to enforce something through zoning that doesn't fit with what the vision of the community is in the comp plan.
So for the open house, just give us the details again, when and where.
Tuesday, the 29th, 4 to 7 p.m. at the Gering Civic Center. And
there will be a lot of information available for you there. Your opportunity to voice even more opinion on the future growth of the city of Gering. Annie, thank you very much for joining us on News Extra today.
Thanks.